All right, welcome everybody to the October, even though it's actually not October anymore, it's now November, the October Meetup, Leptos Meetup. And I managed to pull a rookie move again by leaving another browser tab open with my own audio. So I'm 0 for 2 months, back-to-back months doing that. So anyways, welcome to the October monthly meetup for Leptos. It's going to be pretty jam-packed meetup this month. We've got Leptos community updates. Baptiste is going to join us. He's got an update for I18N for Leptos. Then we've got Greg is going to be joining us, as is always the case. He's going to be discussing some updates on 0.7, followed by some updates on stores. I think Ben's going to be dropping in at some point, and I think he has some updates as well. And before we get started, we just wanted to give a quick open call out to anybody that might have any interest in helping out with the docs for 0.7. That's kind of one of the last couple of things, one of the last couple of things that we need to tie up on 0.7. So we're working on that, but there's a few things here and there to update in the documentation. If anybody wants to help out with that, feel free to hit me up on Discord. You can find me at Coolhand Lucifer is my Discord handle. I post periodically, mostly about the meetups in Discord. You can find me in there, or just post in general and just say you were interested in helping with the docs. So with that being said, I will go ahead and bring you on stage, Baptiste, and then you can do your updates for I18N. And how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, so what have you got for us this month?
First, I want to, for people that don't know the price, it's share my screen really quick.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe sorry, I kind of threw you in there a little bit. Maybe give us a little bit of maybe some background on I18N. You had joined us earlier this year as well. So some people here so some people here might already be a little bit familiar with it, but maybe just give us a little bit of a background.
So it's a crate that I mean, now my goal is to be more like for people that know next edit N. Sorry, I speak French. Next 18N. It's something that is widely used. It's kind of like the state of the art of internalization. So it's for managing translation in an application. So if you want to support multiple languages, so the idea is to kind of do the same thing as I18 Next and bring it to Leptos. There is another crate called Leptos Fluent that use Fluent RS.
Baptiste, can you zoom in a little bit on your browser
to
make it a little easier to see on the screen?
Yeah.
Boom,
my bad.
There we go. Perfect. Thanks.
So it's a crate to manage translations. So to make it easy to use, the idea is you to incorporate a translation. You just do this. So you pass some kind of context and a key to a translation, and you use some configuration files. There is either JSON or YAML to kind of describe some key and some values, and you can use them. So either some plain text, or you can even interpolate some values in it. And the idea is to integrate very easily the translation and not have some kind of match everywhere to see, am I in French, in English, or something, and just you just do your configuration files, and there is one macro you have to call, and then you kind of use you call this use I18N inside, and just use it like this, and boom, it managed for you the local that you use, to set the language tag on the HTML. It do some kind of stuff for you. You can set it to save the the current local in some kind of cookie. There is a lot of things. The idea is to be as simple as possible to integrate, and also to be as performant as possible. But that's another talk. And I've done a release about 2 months ago, with a lot of updates about it, and the main focus was to there was a problem with my credit is there was no specific things for locals. I mean, what I mean by that is, for example, we don't have I didn't have proper support for plurals. So plurals are thing like where is plurals? Why don't have, should be here. Yeah, progress plurals is if you are in a plural state or in a singular state or some other state, there is language where you, you use different things for one individual, two individual, a few individual, or multiple individual, or zero individual, and plurals were a way to describe what to do. For example, in French, 0 and 1 are both singular, but in English, 0 is plural. So you say 0 items in English, but in French you say 0 item. You don't put a s in French, and so we needed a way to have proper support. And the way I did that is by introducing ICU for X as a backend, which is a crate that solves some specific problems for internalization. And so I use ICU4X, some kind of backend to do a lot of things like formatting, for plurals, for different stuff. So V04 was more about introducing ICU4X and a lot of the stuff they proposed, and some other stuff. But with the incoming of 0.7, the focus will be on binary size. There is an issue I have that is like almost a year back, and the problem was when you have all your translation in the files, they are baked in the binary. They are statically loaded, and the problem that it comes with is it takes a lot of space in the binary. If you have, I don't know, 18 different languages, if you want to send you send your client binary to the client, and it has the 18 different languages, but it doesn't need 18 different language. So what we wanted is just send one, and if it needs another, just lazy load it. But it needed kind of a big rewrite, and that's what is coming with the new updates. If I manage to go to the release, I've released it with the this version, and there is two things about binary improvement that comes with it. The first one is lazy loading, and the other one is there is a problem with ICU4X, is that by default it bakes in the binary all the information for every possible local that exists. So it takes a huge place. I'm going to show you is this very simple example here. We use plurals.
Hey, Baptiste, would you mind, again, same with the browser, would you mind zooming
sure.
in a bit?
I don't know to zoom here. I think it's
yeah, it's just yeah, there you go. You got it. Thank you.
So if we go to the locals, we see we use plurals here for click one, and so if we go where is it? It's somewhere. Yeah, sure, it's here. So here it is local, some plurals, but if we look at the binary size, it's I mean, you see, it's a very simple example, and if I forgot to provide it with release, because I want to show you the binary size for when you use the ICU4X as a backend. It takes a lot of space, and but what ICU4X also propose is a way to do. It has ICU datagen, which is a way to create your own baked data with only what you need. But it's kind of hard to work with. So if we look at the binary size, if we do to here, we see it's about 3.5 kilo. So that's octet in French. So it's KB. So it's about 3K. And if we look at something that use actual datagen here, oh no, I went to the wrong one. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's this one that I wanted to compile with these. So it's compiled with this and up level Z. So it should be very small, but if we look, it's this one. It's gonna update, I think. This one. When is it finish? It's about to be finished. So yeah, ICU4X proposes a way to create your own. So yeah, it's about 400K, and if we go to something that use this datagen is so here the only thing that we added is a build.rs to actually create those data, and we look at it, it's 250K, but it's the same application. It do exactly the same thing, but the only difference is it's create some tailored data for ICU4X. So it's about something like, I don't know, 1.5x reduction, something like that. So it's really good. It's something that is basically free, because if you look at the build.rs, it's something that's a crate that I've made now, where you just give some directory, and you pass the translations, and you generate the data in that directory. And the only thing after that that you have to do is include the data and use this macro. So this is basically what you do with datagen, with ICU datagen, and I just really the only thing I do is really some kind of wrapper around datagen that looks at what the translation do you have, what do you need, and everything, and just create the data for you. So you don't have to mess with datagen that is very that you can really easily mess up, and is the docs are not great, to be honest. And it is just make something really simple to use for the user, and so it's really 5 lines, and it's a huge reduction on the binary size. And it works exactly the same thing. If you look behind the two, it's exactly the same application, and it works exactly the same. The only thing is just do one more build step, and it reduces a lot. It reduces a lot of the data. So that's for ICU. But there is also lazy loading that I want to showcase. So for now, it only works with SSR, sorry, because it uses under the hood server functions. I'm currently working on making work for CSR, but for now it's only for SSR. So if we look at the application, we can look. We can look at something is if we look at the elements where it's this script. So it's incorporate the use translation in the sent HTML, and so there is no translation in the binary. The baked data is completely gone, and it looks at when the request is made to the server, it actually looks at, okay, what are the translation that you used, and after that it put them in the sent HTML. And if you request another translation here, it actually requests them. So I mean, there's only one thing apparently in there. Oh yeah, no, sorry. There is two call because I use I take the example that use some. No, it's not this one. Sorry. That use namespaces. So there's a call for each namespaces. They are both different. You just don't request for each locals. You request for each local per namespace. So here is a call for, I don't know for which one, say the payload. So it's for counter, and here is the change local namespace. So on a small application like that, it's actually going to make the binary size bigger. And the reason for that is because it's a very simple app. There is no use of a server function other than the one for the translations. There is a lot of stuff that is made to actually request the translation, but it's kind of a fixed cost. So the more you use the translations, the more translations you have, the less and less that cost is, to a point where after a point that cost is less than baking all the translation in the binary. I don't have a big enough example to show the binary difference, but yeah, at one point, if you have a big enough application, it's worth it. And the transition is pretty seamless. Like if you look here, we just request, and the request is pretty small, but and it should be a drop-in replacement. You do exactly the same thing. You call the same functions, and the only thing you have to do is just add one more feeders to the crate. So yeah, that's it. That's about what I had to present.
Dude, that
So
is awesome.
the next thing that is coming is to edit for CSR, but it's a bit different because you can't use server functions. So I'm kind of thinking about how do I let the user of the application setups, where are the translations, how do I request those files, things like that. So it's I know how to implement it, but it's just the overall API to describe that things. How do I make that? How do I make it very configurable, or do I lock the user in one specific thing? I don't. That's the only thing I'm thinking about
Yeah.
until I can make it. Yep.
I know I'm going to bring Greg on. I know he had a question for you. And as I bring Greg on, I'll just also just say to anybody else in the chat, if anybody has any questions for Baptiste on I18N for Leptos, be sure to put them in the chat and we can ask them right now before we let him go. But Greg, what was the question that you had?
Yeah, I have two things I want to say. One, just adding on to your note about the binary size, I think the really cool thing with lazy loading the translations is that you pay like a small constant cost, like you said, to be able to do that, but that it breaks apart the linear relationship between the binary size and how much content you have. So like, you know, rather than, it's not just like you said, the 1.5 times reduction of not having the translation files in the application. It's that if you add a third, a fourth, a fifth, a 10th language, you don't pay any cost in the binary size for those because it's just, you know, it breaks apart that relationship, which I think is really good.
I can't say you pay none. There is still a cost, because the the translation are not passed at runtime; they are passed at compile time. So there is a bit of code that is outputted for
Oh,
each
sure.
translations. So there is still a small, like a small cost that you pay for, because basically what the crate outputs, I mean, it's not up to date, but there's a lot of code that is outputted. If we look here, um, it's not out to date. It's some kind of best effort docs, but there is a lot of things that are outputted. And for example, if you want to do some interpolation, there is some kind of big struct here that is created with the import into view, but now into view doesn't exist anymore, so that's why it's not really up to date. But there is still some cost that you have, but it's way less.
Sure.
It's like very small fraction of the real cost.
Sure.
But yes,
But the other thing I want to say is if you go back to your editor,
yeah,
there
the
was
inlay.
something very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I saw your.
Oh,
So
okay, yeah, yeah.
this right
Yeah, so
here,
how does that work?
it's extension that is called I18N Ally. So if you go to any example, I have this recommendation, but that's for VS Code.
Mhm.
I don't know if there is any for other, but for other editors. But it's something where you just you basically what you do is they they look at JSON files and you set him up with some kind of settings where you say where is the locals, what is the key style, and you pass to make it work with Rust. Is you can use some kind of regex to match where each key is, and it will replace it with an overlay on what it
Mhm.
looks like in the but it doesn't work with plurals. So I think that's kind of
Ah,
sad. Plurals don't work. That's why it's here. It doesn't work. Here it say it doesn't work. It gives some kind of
mm.
error somewhere. I mean, I don't know. But it doesn't work for plurals. If but yeah.
Still really
Uh,
cool though.
it's pretty cool, but it's great when you read the code, but when you're actually changing the code, it's like kind of get in the way, to be
Ah,
honest. But
mm.
it's pretty easy to uh, I don't know. I mean, I said it was pretty easy, but I knew somewhere you could deactivate it pretty easily. Well, I don't
Ah.
know. But yeah, it's 18 alive for people that want to know.
Very cool.
And so I have a documentation on it in my book, I think. I think I talk about, yeah, I have an appendix on it that talk about the settings that you can use and how to use it. Yep. So that's it for me. And if anybody has any question.
Well, I think that was about it. I posted I posted the link to the GitHub in both chats. We do have somebody that says nice, and I
Thank
would
you.
echo that myself. Tell you put a lot of work into this, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if there is a lot of people that use it. Sometimes people come and say, "Oh, I'm using there is a problem," and I try to fix it. But I don't know if this is like a widely used crates. I think I don't look at downloads on crates.io because it's kind of weird because you just went out for a release and there's already 18 people downloaded it and you're like, no,
Mm.
that's not real. And I think it's a lot of like scrapping bots. I don't know. So I don't think it's really representative of how many people use it. I try to look at GitHub Insights to find people that use the crate inside the project, but I don't find like a lot of them. I don't have a lot of feedbacks on it, but it's something that is dear to my heart, and I don't maintain it only to please people. It's also really a personal project that I like. It's more a learning project. I learn a lot of things about it. Like for example here, how to reduce binary size. I looked a lot into what technique you can use with Rust and stuff like that, with monomorphization and things. And so yeah,
Yeah,
I
I mean, you've got the repo has 88 stars on GitHub. I mean, that's not insignificant.
yeah, I'm
That's
impressed. I mean,
yeah. So, I mean, if you've got
every
88
time I look
stars,
at
then
it,
that's probably a
like
small percentage of the number of people who actually use it.
yeah, that's what I like to think. But there was a point where for about I don't know 3 months, something like that, for personal reason, I had to stop maintaining it. So there was like a 3 month of stalling, and I looked at the insight and I saw a lot of projects just moving to another crate, and I was like, oh, that hurts. But hey, I understand. But now I'm kind of back into maintaining it and adding new feeders. So uh, I expect it to gain a bit more traction now.
For sure. Well, hopefully this meetup
Well,
helps.
thank you
And
for having
next,
me on the stream, and I will leave you at that.
absolutely. And next time you have a big update or anything, just feel free to hit me up in Discord. You're always welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Merci, Baptiste.
Thank
Au
you so much,
revoir.
Baptiste.
Au revoir.
All right, Greg. So we can jump into, I guess, first the 0.7 updates and then the stores, right?
Yeah, awesome. Sounds good. Hey, everybody. Nice to see you all here in the YouTube chat and so on. And if you're watching later, hello to you too. So I just wanted to give like a pretty quick update on the where 0.7 is in terms of release, and then I'm going to do a demo showing off stores, which are kind of one of the bigger new features that are part of this release and enabled by this release, but that we were talking right before we started streaming. And Baptiste and Luke were both like, what are stores? I kind of understand, but not really. So I'm going to do a demo of stores just in the client and on the server, and try to help get a little bit more of an intuition of like when these would be a good tool. But right now, I just want to start off by saying, with regard to 0.7, hopefully people saw there's a release candidate out. Weirdly enough, docs.rs seems to have crashed while building the docs for that. So I'm hoping that's a temporary issue. It hadn't been a problem on the other pre-release versions. So it's a little tricky right now in terms of docs.rs docs. There are GitHub release notes for that convey pretty much everything about how you go from 0.6 to 0.7. Start trying it out, right? Like release candidate means unless there's some really egregious bug that comes up that requires breaking changes, there shouldn't be any breaking changes at all between now and the actual release. So again, like if you've been looking for a time to migrate over, now's a great time. It's quite stable. We're not seeing a big flood of bugs, but I just, I'm giving it a little bit of time, in part to try to catch any bugs that exist, but also just to get docs updated. So like Luke said at the top, the kind of the last big missing thing is updating docs. Need to go through and update the book. So something that would be really concretely helpful would be if people could go through the book and just try to run the code snippets. Those don't get like checked in CI or anything because that's hard to do in that book format. So if people could make notes of which examples need to update in the book, and then, I'll be going through and trying to update just the missing docs on structs and functions, methods, and stuff to make sure things are in good shape. And once that's all done, I think it's pretty much ready to release. So I've seen a couple little odd bugs here and there coming in, but nothing that, requires big changes. So yeah, it's pretty close. I'm pretty excited. It's been, I think I basically started working on what became this release last September. So like 14 months ago. We ended up, thank goodness, doing the intervening 0.6 release with the big server function rewrite. And then it's been a while just getting it from the it's 80% done, that means it's going to be 80% of the time left to finish it off, right? The 80-20 rule. Anyway, so it's really close. I'm gonna, I would expect that the 0.70 final release will be this month. It's a pretty busy next couple of months for me and the rest of my life, but I don't see any reason that won't happen. And then we'll all celebrate, and that'll be awesome. And it's also been great. It's given a lot of the ecosystem time to update. So like I know, Leptos Use is ready to go. Thaw is ready to go. Leptos I18N is ready to go. Lots of the good ecosystem libraries have had time to update for 0.7. So you should be able to pretty much just update most things. So yeah, that's my 0.7 kind of status update. And thanks to everyone for patience, both in terms of uncovering some really hairy issues like weird linker errors and things that have come up, but also just in terms of release. I know there are a lot of things that were sort of, for a while, I almost had like a meme of this will be fixed in 0.7, except for 6 months, it was like, this is fixed in 0.6. And that was like 9 months ago before the actual 0.6. So it's been a while coming for some of the stuff like async and all that. We've been showing that off for months now in these meetups. So I do want to show off today one more cool new thing, which is stores. And I feel a little bad. I feel like I've been kind of dishonest with people, right? Signals kind of suck in a very specific way. And the way in which signals kind of suck is when you have nested reactive state. So if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you have like a signal of a vec of signals or a signal of a struct where all the fields are signals, it can be kind of rough. And you know what I'm talking about, right? Which is like struct foo, where bar is like an RW signal of a string, and baz is another RW signal of a usize or whatever. And you have to juggle this sort of nested reactivity. So I've been trying to noodle on solutions to that for a really long time. It's pretty tricky. The way that JavaScript libraries that support fine-grained reactivity do this is usually by using proxies. And that's really great. Unfortunately, this is Rust. We don't have proxies. We don't have getters. So I can't just say that, like, if we go back to this struct that I had, I can't just declare that like struct.bar, foo.bar, this thing is going to be a signal. I can't tell Rust to do something else. But I finally, after like a year of thinking about this, came up with what I think is a pretty good option for it, and turned out to work well. And that's these stores. So we'll walk through this example and how it works. But first, I'll just show you the actual demo application, so you have a little bit of an understanding of what we're talking about here. So this is just a silly little to-do app. We've got a section where you can set your name, your user info. So we've got Bob, his email, loblog@bobloblaw.com, and then his to-do list. And like all good to-do apps, of course, it jumps a little pre-formatted JSON blob here, which is obviously what you want your to-do app to do. But you can see this is just a basic thing. So we can add a to-do. You can buy milk. We can edit something. Make sandwich, and you'll see that just updated down here, right? This is just making sure that stuff works, and then I can mark stuff. And for this, we're actually going to do it kind of fancy. You can have a to-do that's pending, or you can schedule it for a particular date. I don't know why Chrome didn't make that dark mode. That's funny. Or you can mark it done, right? And so I can like schedule these for different days, and like that's all great. Super basic application, right? Okay, so let's look at the code here. And I'm hoping this is a pretty good size for people to read. I can go, that might be a little too small. Okay. So yeah, the first place to start is just what are the data structures that we have? So to-dos is going to be our whole application. And like I said, we've got a user in this user section, and we've got a vec of to-dos. Ignore this for now. We'll come back to that one. And so far, this is all just plain data, which is great. So a user is a struct who has a name and an email. And holy clearly I don't use VS Code that much, and I have no idea what I just clicked on. Okay. So the user has the name and the email, and those obviously just correspond to like the name and email. A to-do has an ID, just some unique ID, a label, and then that status. And then that status we saw was an enum that had a pending state, scheduled for some date, and done. And also this useless field that we don't actually use in this application. So this is totally normal. Hopefully, if you've written like any Rust, which I assume you have, if you're watching this, this all totally makes sense. These are plain structs and enums. But we don't have like a signal wrapped equivalent, right? Oh, and we even have this little right on the status where I was stepping through it, right? So where it goes like pending to scheduled to done. I just modeled that as a method, right? Takes immutable reference to self and does like a little state machine enum match, updates itself. And you can see I'm using chrono for the date time there, which does work with JavaScript. And we can do things like create a new to do. And again, like it's just a plain method. So like this whole thing is totally in JavaScript, don't you say a POJO, plain old JavaScript object? This is plain old Rust data, right? Which is great. And the way that we usually add some other kind of functionality to any kind of Rust data type is through often like a derive macro that implements some trait, right? So if you look at this, you'll see that we're deriving, debug, serialize, deserialize, and store. And so deriving store on some data type is how you start making a store. That's like step number 1. And then step number 2, unsurprisingly, is making a store new. And this, returns a store of to-dos, which is great. That's kind of exactly what we want. And then, like I said, in JavaScript, right, you would use like a proxy to access these fields. We just use getters. So the username, right? Let's say I want to get the name. That would be like let name equals, and let's put it in a closure because this is going to be some reactive data. Store dot, let's see, user dot name. So we use these getters, and each field of the struct has a getter with the name of that field. So if you look at the store macro here, what it's doing is basically creating a getter for each of the fields. So it creates a method user and a method to-dos. And then in user, we have a method name and a method email. And the type that returns is some crazy nested type. So you can think of these as being a little bit like the way an iterator works, right? When you map over an iterator, it's building up some struct, and it's keeping that kind of reactivity on the outside, or it's keeping that iteration on the outside. In our case, it's kind of keeping the reactivity on the outside. But so if I want to get the user's name, I just do store.user.name. And this returns something that's almost like a signal. So if I can do store.user.name dot, if I want to get the value of that, I can do get. Let's do get untracked to be good. And this is how I get the string, right? So you can think of store.user.name basically returns me a signal that's the user.name field. But you notice, right, the really useful thing here is I don't have to wrap this in a signal, and I don't have to wrap this in a signal, but it's still going to be reactive. And you've seen exactly that in the app, right? So right here, we've got store.user.name.get. That's funny. And in the application, if I, update Bob to Robert, it updates right here, right? So it works just like a signal. And if you want to get together like a mental map of some model for how this works, you can think of a store as basically keeping the value in one place. So that whole to-dos struct is like an arc RW lock to-dos. And then it has basically a hash map of signals, triggers really, like signals with no value in them, but just reactivity. And it's a hash map from, basically this path of getters to that trigger. And then when you track that signal, you do a get, it just tracks that one little path. And when you update it, it just updates that one little path. And the point of that, right? If I pull open my my DevTools here, I think I put some logging in. Yeah, good. So you can see here how it logs title is, status is, right? So when it's created, this is just an effect that I have. Two separate effects to log, right? One that's just tracking the title, one that's just tracking the status. And the point of using a store is that you can independently update the fields and it won't notify the other one. So if I do like create reactive stores, then it only triggers the signal that's listening to the title. If I just change the status, it only triggers the signal listening to the title. If I add another to do, it triggers both of those on the new to do, but none of the other to dos, right? So it allows you to go from having this one big object that is holding all your data, but then you're doing basically fine-grained reactivity on the fields without having to, clone the whole value of the thing and do a derived signal down, without having to do the kind of memo slicing thing, and so on. So it basically gives you fine-grained access to the different fields of a struct, which is really useful, right? So like this thing is only going to re-render when the user's name changes. When I add to-dos, when I change the user's email, whatever, this doesn't change. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Maybe just walk down through a couple of other things here. We'll go to the user form in a minute. This one, when we're submitting a to-do, right, you can see you got the store. So we've got the whole store here, just like a signal. This is a copyable type, so we just moved it into this closure. The form submit, preventing the default so it doesn't refresh the page. And then we just do store.todos.write.push to do new. And when we do to do new, that's going to take the label. So right here, we're just getting the value of the label out of a node ref. One of the many ways that you could get the value out of some input here, if you want to. So that's the really simple form, right? And then the for component here, you'll notice here in the each field, I'm able to just put store.todos. We implemented into iter for what's called like a keyed subfield. So in other words, if you think about the way for works, you always have a key, and this is like a key for the UI. When should I render a new row versus just moving a row around or deleting a row? How do I know which row is which? We do the same thing actually for the store fields themselves, because if you think about it, right, if you're tracking these little individual signals, and each one corresponds to like some path, you can almost think of it as being like a file path, right? So you can have a signal for a field that's /user/name as opposed to /user/email. And those are two little different signals, and we only update them when you update that particular one. But then if we have these to-dos, we might have like /todos/0/todos/1, but we want those to correspond to these IDs, not to the index in the list, because then if you move them around, right, you don't have to throw out the whole thing and re-render and start over. You can move it around, but keep updating, say, the label on a particular one, right? So that if you're updating some label, it updates the correct field in the UI, right? So we just have this keyed field, which looks exactly like the key on a for. There's some duplication here, but it's kind of a thing that you do once, right? And usefully, it's separate from the whole notion of using a for component. So you could use this to track these without the for component, right? And it's the same idea. You just provide a key, so it takes the to-do, and it's going to give us back the to-do ID. And this is saying this is a unique ID. So if you're tracking the signal for to-do 0, wherever that to-do moves around in this list, we can swap things, we can do whatever we want. It's going to track the right field. So yeah, I mean, that's how you do this this whole thing with stores, where you're able to keep your data in one place. And you see editing, a subfield of the store notifies back up that tree. editing the parent notifies back down that kind of tree, but the siblings don't notify each other, right? So I can just track the whole store here in my little JSON stringify thing. And whenever I change some small subfield of it, it's going to notify this and update all that JSON. But it doesn't affect any of these other effects that are listening, right? Hopefully that all makes sense. The one other thing that is cool here, right, is if you think about it, so the kind of one big problem with signals, with fine-grained reactivity, is this problem of nesting signals inside signals inside signals when you have a data structure like a struct or like a vec, and you get into the whole RW signal user problem, right? The other one is when you then get some new data and you want to update them. So an example of this might be a resource that you're loading from the server. If this was stored on the server and we got some new data, it may be the case that only one of these things had changed. But as far as a resource works right now, right, it's going to update all of this because it's just one big blob of state. It's just a signal. And likewise, if I want to just update this, and I don't want to individually update the name and the email, but I want to update sort of the whole user, but nothing else, right? It's a little tricky to know exactly how to do that when you have these nested signals without triggering multiple different updates. So a second thing that I added that this whole structure enables is, if you look on user, there's also this patch derive. And these are the two derives in stores. You've got store, which you always use for a store, and then patch. And what patch allows us to do is to provide a new user, like take a user, give it a user, and it will only update fields that have actually changed. So we can see that in this user form component here. And this, by the way, the field here, right? This is just like a way of type erasing these complicated chains of things. So if you look at the type signatures here, right, you've got like this long one, but you can also do you can say like, I don't care what this whole long type signature is. I just want some field that's a string, right? That's what field is in all these examples. And of course, because it works with from, it works nicely with prop into and stuff. So really cozy. So user form, right, takes store.user, and that automatically erases the type signature. So we can just say, hey, it's a user. Okay, now in this one, right, you see what we have here. We've got this form that if you read through the code, right, ev.prevent default, right, it doesn't do the default form behavior, which is an HTTP request. Instead, we're going to try to get a user from event. And this is a utility function that's been around in the library for a long time. It just uses the same CRD-QS library that we use for server functions by default, and tries to parse the form fields by their names into some data structure, right? So I've got like name equals name equals email on the two inputs, and it parses that into a user, or it errors. We handle the error with just a little signal up here. And so then if I manage to get a user from my form data, it's going to clear out the error. And then here's the user.patch, right? And so what .patch does here, right, is it only triggers reactive update on a field that's actually changed. So I don't think I actually show an example of doing that. Maybe let's just copy and paste this one down, and then I'm going to move over to the other demo that I had here. But so if we want to, if you don't believe me that it really only does that, we can do user.name and user.email. And we'll give trunk a second here, I think. And so, right, if we look at this, these effects should only log when they're actual field updates. And you notice this, right? This is not a controlled form, right? We're not updating. We don't have like an on input here that updates some signal. We're just doing it when we submit the form, and we're updating with the whole value of this struct. Good. So now if I go in here, okay, we see name, email. And if I update this, it only triggers this effect, and it only triggers the email one, right? And so this is really fun and nice and cozy for form updates and stuff, whatever. Like that's good. I've been moving more and more toward kind of uncontrolled forms like this over time, because it, like, this pattern is, I think, pretty nice for just getting some data out of a form and doing something with it. And here you're able to maintain that fine-grained update, which is awesome. But this becomes really nice when you start interacting with the server. And so I'm going to move over to my my other demo here. And this is a demo of a very familiar looking application, right? Which is the same thing, just without the users. And I got really lazy. I didn't even add any kind of streaming. So you see this is almost like a local resource, right? It's just loading after the pages here. And so for this app, right, if you look at this, we can add a to-do by milk again, right? Like it sets it up here. We can, we got an error. I may actually need to kill this and restart it for the demo I'm actually trying to show to work. Cool. Anyway, so here we go, right? So if I'm like buy milk, then we get this immediate update. And you can kind of see it previewed by how long that loading was in there, right? What I did in this demo was I added, I think it's a 2-second sleep. Yeah, so when we update it to do, we do two things. One is it's going to wait for 2 seconds. And I also just made it error out on every third call. And the point of that is to show exactly this, right? So you've got buy milk, eat lunch, and you can see how long this network request is going in. And it's while that loading is up there, you know, whatever. You can see it's got this purple while it's pending, and then, oh no, it disappeared. So we've just reverted back to the previous state here. So basically, you know, all that we're doing here, right, is just saying, send the whole value over to the server, update it optimistically right here in the client. So it immediately updates here, and then it's going to take a second to load. That's funny. There's a little missing effect here that I had before. That's okay. And so, you know, looking at the code, it's the same exact thing. We added a couple more traits for no obvious reason, but it's the same to-do struct. I'm not even using the user in here. You get the same to-do. This is almost a copy and paste of the same thing. I have this little server store. This is just defined in userland in this example. It's not something from the library. It's the sort of thing I might build into something in the library, but it was flexible enough to just define in the example. So I did that for now. And, you know, you can see it's basically the same application. We got the for loop. We've got the form to add a to-do. There's nothing here that obviously corresponds with the server, except in the little server store, I just made an effect that calls a server function right here. And you see my fun, to do race conditions, right? But the idea is this is built entirely in my application and didn't need anything else. And then importantly, right, we just patch when there's that error and it wants to fall back, it's just patched with whatever the previous value was. But you can easily see how, you know, you could build something that, you know, would load new data from the server, patch the old data against it, and then you get these fine-grained updates rather than kind of re-rendering the whole thing. And this is also a great example of the kind of optimistic updates, right? So I can say, I don't wait the 2 seconds to see my new to-do. It appears, and then if there's a problem, it will remove it and it will give me the error message. But while it's here, right, I can just use my UI as if these things aren't taking 2 seconds to update every time on the server. And then clearly there are a couple of bugs in here with different things that I've done, but it's a pretty quick example. If we're going to build it into the framework itself, then it'll be a little more robust than me throwing it together. But it's that optimistic update that you get. And then the other thing just to notice is in a lot of like the to-do app examples that we have, there will be two separate things. There's the server action, and then that tells it to refresh a request. So like when you've invalidated something, then it'll reload and it'll wipe this all out and replace it. This is just doing a single request. It's assuming that it's successfully updating it, and it's updating the UI immediately rather than waiting those 2 seconds for the request to come back, and then it doesn't need to make another request to load the new data. So you're using a little less bandwidth too. And this is just, I guess I just clicked onto this by accident, but it's showing the the format that this is all serialized in. And then the response it's sending back is just null, like my update to-dos, right? The server function to update the to-dos takes to-dos, which is the struct that our store is built off of, and just returns unit type. So it's going to give us an error if there was an error. Otherwise, we just assume that the to-dos we sent are now the latest state of things. So that's another kind of way. This it was possible to build optimistic UI like this without stores. The reason I wanted to explore this is it's an interesting way of also kind of fetching new data from a server and updating it and still getting that fine-grained interactivity. Yeah, so I'm going to, I'm on just my laptop, not an external screen, so I don't know if anyone's had any questions or whatever. I'll stop sharing my screen for now. And yeah, we can chat.
Yeah, so there was first of all, that's awesome, man. That's super exciting. There were a few questions coming in. A couple of them were quite interesting.
Good.
Seems like we've got one that's kind of a detailed question, and then a couple questions that seem like they're more kind of high level. People kind of trying to wrap their heads around kind of conceptually what stores are.
Good.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just do them in order. So Ifiok Jr. asks, can you rename so this is in the context of thinking of conflicts with impl methods. Can you rename the name of the getter?
That would be a great thing to add. There isn't any reason that shouldn't be possible. The macro doesn't have that built in right now, but there's no reason that it couldn't be. In other words, just like in serialize, deserialize, serialize, right? By default uses field names, but you can provide it a rename. Yeah, the macro doesn't do it. There's absolutely no technical reason that it couldn't be done. The way that it works, the stores are actually, it's not a path of names, it's a path of U sizes or U32s or something, right? And it's like struct fields are field 0, 1, 2. So it doesn't actually care what the methods are named. It defaults to the field names. But yeah, obviously, like people also tend to do getters for fields too, right? So that would be a great feature.
Cool. Yeah, he actually says he's happy to create a PR.
Oh, sick. That'd be amazing. Yep. Oh, and the other thing that I didn't quite show, right, is you saw with the enum field of the status, right? Like it doesn't just work on structs. That was deriving it on an enum, and we can get into this is like stores 201, but there's interesting things of how you do matching on an enum field and getting fine-grained updates when it switches from one branch to another branch of the enum, right? And it's like reactively, it gives you an option of the inner thing because you might have it or might not, right? So it's like, it's pretty cool. It works pretty flexibly with all sorts of data types. So yeah, PR totally welcome. That should be pretty straightforward to add.
Awesome. So these next two questions are quite similar, although I don't know. We'll see. I'll ask them though consecutively, and then we can take them together. First one is this sort of like Zustand stores? And then the next question is it correct to think of stores as basically automatic convenient slices?
Yes, it is. So stores should be strictly better than slices, I think. Stores are what we were hoping to achieve by creating slices, the same pattern of saying, here's a reactive blob. I only care when this part of it updates, and I want to update this part of it in particular. So yes, like I don't think there's a reason to technically deprecate slices at the moment, but the the sorts of things you might use a big blob and then slices, or a big blob and then memos. By big blob, I mean a signal of a struct, right? This is exactly that. Yep, perfect. Good intuition.
Cool.
Are
Awesome.
these ZooStand stores? I've been out of JS world a little bit too long. Remind me, is ZooStand fancy Redux?
It's kind of like centralized state management, I think, is probably a good way to put it. I just loaded up their website. A small, fast, and scalable bare bones state management solution. As far as I understand, it's basically like you can like set some sort of state like in a central location and then access it in various different components.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So it looks quite similar. I mean, it's I think if I recall correctly, ZooStand is much like Redux, right? Is one centralized source of state, and then you define certain actions you can take to update that state, right? And it's very similar to, if anyone's heard of or used Elm or the Elm architecture, right? And it's, if anybody has any like computer science type background, right? It's a finite state machine, right? It's like you have some state and you have some actions to update that state. And then you have a function that says, when I get this action, do this thing. To the extent that none of that was useful for anyone listening or asking a question, totally fine. But yes, you could, right, decide, I don't like the way in which signals and local signal state make my app more complex because I can no longer see what's doing what. I want a very explicit global state solution. So I'm going to create a store that has some global state that I want to have. It can even have an enum of different kinds of states that your application can be in, right? Because we showed like the scheduling enum. I did an enum, not a bool, for that because it's it shows off this enum part of things, right? So you could have a big thing of state, and then you could say, and I want to take little sub. I mean, Redux does call them slices, a slice of that state, and use it in this component, but I don't care about the rest of it. And I want to access just one field of that and use it in this component, but I don't care about the rest. And you could do exactly that kind of pattern, which is a really good pattern. Like that's a really, that lets you create very reliable software, because instead of this implicit state machine of 100 different signals, you can have a single explicit structure that you can update in very predictable ways. And it has been hard to build that with signals because of all the nesting that it requires. So this is a great way of doing something like that. Or if you just want it to be for a smaller part of the application, that also works, right? So they can work together. But yeah, I mean, I haven't used ZooStand, but I've used Redux, and you could use this to do something very similar to what you could do with Redux. And you maintain then fine-grained reactive access to those individual fields that you're accessing, right? So it's kind of the best of both worlds. There is some small overhead to stores because, of course, you're doing the bookkeeping of tracking which field and so on. But so that you would never do a store of a single string, right? That wouldn't make any sense. But it's for situations like that where you have a struct or a vec or some enums, and you want to handle the fields individually. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Okay. That was actually good. That helped me kind of, I think, a little bit better conceptualize it as well. I'm gonna not do a good job on the name here. Madi Tashzarin. Can we impl patch for a struct with external types like chrono?
This is always this is one of the things I like the least about Rust's type system. Is the orphan rule. So the fact that you can't implement a type from implement a trait from crate A for something from crate B if you're in crate C, because well, maybe one day Chrono itself would implement patch. No, right? But Rust, the compiler is very conservative about that. The language is very conservative about that. What you could do would be to create like a new type and to say, okay, and here's how you implement patch on that. I don't think you can do it with the derive macro, although it would be interesting to see what happens when you do. It basically, all that the derive macro is really doing, I think that this is true. Maybe I'll see if I can get a really quick expanded version of it up. Expand macro. I know I'm not sharing my screen or anything. Yeah, okay, cool. I can. Rust Analyzer is cooperating with me. So let me just show this.
Sure.
Cool. So this is the expanded patch macro. It actually is a trait called patch fields. Not a trait called patch. There's a different trait called patch, whatever. I thought it was more convenient than typing patch fields. But patch field takes a mutable reference to self. It takes the new thing owned. It takes the current path you're on and how to notify. So the actual patch trait provides these various things for you. But if you notice, all this is doing is it's kind of iterating over the fields. It's like modifying the path that we're at, which is that kind of directory of which field you're updating. And then it's calling patch fields. And patch field is implemented for the kind of primitive types as just like partial equality. So like if you have a string and you say, well, exactly like this, right? You say patch the name, patch self.name against new name. And the reason it's mutable is if new name is a new name, we're going to actually update this, right? This is updating the struct in place. It just is like an equal check. And if they're not equal, it does it. So yeah, the way that you sort of implement other traits for things from other libraries is complicated. This is why you'll often see like crates that have a SIRD feature to add the SIRD traits on their own structs. Maybe, one way of doing things like that is to add a chrono feature. So it implements it in the library for the chrono structs, whatever. Another way is to do a new type and kind of implement your own. I don't have a great answer to that right now, but there's nothing, it's a pretty simple, it's not a very magical algorithm. It's more just implementing traits for types from other crates is hard.
All right.
And I haven't implemented patch for enums yet, which is why I didn't do it on the whole thing, because I realized I haven't actually done it on enums. Like stores work with enums, but the patching thing doesn't quite. So that's like a work in progress. But well, it sounded like you were saying the end of the question. So I'll just say a word about the kind of release process. One of the things I think is cool with this is that it's not part of Leptos. It's a separate crate that's called Reactive Stores that uses the types in the reactive graph part of Leptos. And what that means is that if this is a separate crate, this can be updated and even go through breaking changes separately from the Leptos release cycle. So because this is so new and experimental, I think it makes sense to keep it kind of separate. But the other cool thing to say about that is that means that all of this functionality is implemented kind of in user land from Leptos's perspective. So like the way that the Leptos is now structured, I could be some random guy who's not me who implemented this stores crate that just happens to use the reactive traits and provide a derive macro and some other primitives. And so this is a great example. Like you wouldn't be able to do this with the current 0.1 to 0.6 form of reactivity, but 0.7 is now following an architecture where things are separate enough that you can create your own reactive primitives that implement these reactive traits that let you track things, let you update things in a separate library. So this is a completely separate library from the perspective of Leptos, other than the fact that they both are my work, right? But from the compiler's perspective, this is just implementing some traits that are over in Leptos, over in Reactive Graph, another crate, right, that is now part of Leptos. So I think that that's a good sign too of the ability to build some of these primitives, like just in my demo or as a separate library. And then we can update and kind of iterate on things more easily too, not have to worry about, we don't break the entire ecosystem by moving from Reactive Stores 0.1 to Reactive Stores 0.2, which is a big deal because I'm hoping to stay on 0.7 for a long time and not go through all this churn. And then I think this is sort of the closest we've been to feeling like there's a 1.0 down the road. So hopefully a lot of this churn that's happened over the last 6 months or so is the one of the last times we'll have to go through this.
Yeah, someone also points out, maybe you can comment on this. It's not really a question, but maybe if you want to comment on it, you can. They say this will break if the user has a destructor, though that might be a very niche case.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd be curious to hear more from them if they're still around to want to put type more. This will break if user has a destructor. Um, there, that may be what you're thinking may be true. I haven't thought through what you're saying enough to understand, right? I mean, all that the patching thing, right, is doing is essentially creating some user and then saying foo.user equals other.user. So like, let's make it not mad at me. So let's call it function patch me this user, that user. All that this is really doing is saying this dot user equals other dot user. I may be not thinking through what you're thinking, or there may be other cases you're thinking of, but in terms of the patching thing, right, it's taking some value and assigning it to another value. So, right, which one of those will the drop implementation run on? I forget. It's not a scenario that I've encountered before. If it doesn't, if this is mostly working with pretty plain data structures, so to the extent that there's like custom effectful drop behavior or something, I'm not sure. I clearly haven't thought about that, but it is really just a way of, yeah.
It's actually Baptiste that asked that, and he's like, I can jump back on the stream if you want.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Why not? Are you here? Are you still in the room?
No, he's not in the room anymore. I don't see him. Here he is.
Oh, okay.
Right, cool.
Hey, yeah, let's get you back.
Yeah. Welcome back, Baptiste.
Welcome back. Yeah. Yeah, it's just that there is a partial move, and if you take only one object out of the, you can't move out a field out of a type that implement drop. So
I see.
When you look at the expanded macro, you move out two fields at different times, and Rust is like, if I panic behind the two during the two moves, it breaks everything, because you're in a state where you try to destructure something where it breaks.
Yeah. No, I now I understand exactly what you're saying. Thanks. Yeah, no, you're totally right. That was awesome. Great, beautiful. I love it. Yes, you're completely right. So there's an interesting question though of
I mean, it's very niche. I don't think people are going to implement drop for like for a struct that is only for data aggregation, but it's just a very niche case where.
Yeah. No, totally. And I guess the nice thing, right, is that without breaking this API, like I can think of ways around that, where what patching does is it always replaces the existing struct with the new struct wholesale, and then it just notifies field by field. Like, right, I guess so the current implementation only modifies the fields if it's actually changed, and only notifies the field if it's actually changed, which causes this partial move, like you said. If we always modify the whole struct, no, but it's a great point, and I had not thought about that at all or anticipated it. So good on you for seeing the expanded code, and then immediately we saw that exactly the error you predicted. That's very impressive when we implemented drop here. So very cool. But I think it should be possible, because you can just replace all of the old user with the new user, and then only notify the fields that changed, instead of only replacing the fields, replace all the fields, and then still only notify the fields that changed. So that's a great note.
Okay. But I just wanted to point it out. If you already know how to get around it, then great. And if you don't plan to get around it, I mean, I don't think it's a big deal to let it break this drop. People are gonna don't really.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
No, but it's
Wanted to
great
point it out.
because like somebody was going to come to me with this issue in the issue tracker, and I was going to have no idea what was happening. And now, now you've said it, and so now I'll remember if we do want to change it. I'm just thinking, can we even just do the expanded version? We do not have to fix this live for sure. Yeah, cool. Right, because in other words, right, it would just be a matter of like we are allowed to.
I mean, you could do some kind of memtech, but it will need the values to implement default or some kind of memory place or something like that. You just, if the value implement drops, you just can't move one singular field out.
Yeah. Right, but we can do the whole thing and then only notify. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. This is helpful.
Okay.
That's great.
Well, I'm going to leave you again. Bye.
Yeah. Good. Bye.
That was awesome.
Amazing.
Can't believe we caught that. Yeah.
When that error popped up, yep, that was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Any
Okay, well, I think that's sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that was it for the questions, but I was gonna say, Christopher did you should probably be warned of this in advance. You are gonna get clipped for Greg Leptos Johnson, quote, signals kind of suck.
Oh yeah. It's true.
Yeah, you were over
in
here.
very specific ways.
Demoing.
And then we spent 45 more minutes talking about it, right? But it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, someone's going to turn that into a YouTube short.
Amazing. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's going to be all sorts of tech influencers, pontificating as to whether in Leptos 0.8, Leptos is going to be leaving signals behind, So
what a beautiful problem to have,
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess with that, then we would end the monthly meetup unless there was anything else you had, Greg?
I do have one more thing. It's actually, I'm joking. It's just a continuation on the influencer point. The last time there was a big YouTuber, right, and Leptos came up, I actually tried to clip it because he said that, not naming names, he said that whenever he saw people trying to do, Rust, whatever front end, it made him kind of cringe. And then he showed our website. And I could not get it lined up so that it could just have his voice saying cringe with the Leptos website in the background because it was like off by a couple seconds. But I was really excited to have that 1 second clip of just being like cringe and it's leptos.dev. So YouTubers, if you wanna come, do your thing.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, if any big influencers are among the 20 people watching this live right now, clip away. We love it.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Luke, for running things as always, and thanks to everyone. Thanks to everyone for coming, and looking forward to getting this release out. And thanks to everyone for being here.
Absolutely. And just one more, little call to action. If anybody wants to pitch in and help out the 0.7 docs, reach out to us on Discord. You can just post in the general chat, or there's also, I think, a docs channel as well. Post in there. Next meetup will be in 4 weeks on November 30th, even though it'll be the same month, but I don't know. October somehow it wound up where it seemed like really close together, and it was just easier to do it this weekend. So, and then we have December monthly, and then that rounds the year out. I don't know. Are we gonna do some kind of end of year celebration? I mean, we're a pretty global audience, so I don't know if it's like a Christmas party or a New Year's event or a holiday party. I don't know. Maybe
sounds fun
we do
to
something
me.
special. Yeah,
it'd be pretty great.
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be weird Christmas for me because being in Australia, it's gonna be like 35 degrees Celsius. Yeah, it's gonna be like like 90, 95 degrees Fahrenheit for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
It's gonna be weird. Yeah.
Yep. That's hot.
Yeah, for Christmas for sure. All right, cool. Well,
Awesome.
thanks.
Enjoy yourself. Have a great afternoon.
All right,
Or night,
likewise.
morning. Sleep well. It's like midnight.
Yeah.
It's like 1:30 in the morning for you. Okay, bye. Get out of here.
All right,
Go to bed.
see you. All
Take
right.
it easy.